Alex, thanks for coming on.
I don't do interviews, and I've never done an interview like this in my 30-year career because I like asking the questions. But I like you very much, and I've watched a lot of things you do, and you're not particularly nice, and I've never been known for being nice as an interviewer, and I think it makes great TV. And I've got a lot I need to get off my chest. This is 132 days of being gagged.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the exclusive.
So pardon me, excuse me, what is that smell in here? I'm not being funny, but can I just... Is this the chair that Bonnie Blue... Is this the chair that Bonnie Blue sat on?
That's the infamous chair.
You know, she's been stopped by 1,000 men. I know the feeling. And welcome to my legal affairs. Do you think she'd ever consider a ginger with a micro penis? Because I'm thinking that could be the one to go viral.
I think everyone's got a line, Alex. That could be crossing it.
Are you suggesting she wouldn't do charity work?
She's all about the money.
Well, exactly.
Saying that, though, she's been kicked off OnlyFans, so maybe. But let's go back to you. I appreciate you doing the exclusive, and you've agreed that nothing's off the table.
Nothing at all, other than one thing, which is a court order that we cannot cross. So I can't even tell you what that court order is. But trust me, I'm an open book. There's nothing to hide. I will answer any question if I can. If I can't, I will remain silent. But I will be as honest as I can within the court orders that I have, because this is all about shushy, and it was from the beginning. There are things they don't want me to say. Having said that, I've had the most incredible 132 days with revelations. Shall I move the air freshener, by the way? Do you think that ought to? That I hope will clear up a lot for your audience and mine as well.
Okay. Well, I want to talk to you about stalking, prison, lawfare, and the BBC, and some police cover-ups. So, 2021, I found YouTube. I'm very late to the party, and you were one of the first people that popped up on my radar. And I'm seeing that you're having a back and forth with a few people, and you've been arrested, and then there's a trial, and it's a stalking trial, and then all of a sudden you've got a guilty verdict, and you've got 5.5 years. Now, back then I thought, fuck me, like, what has happened there? Because you'd never met the human beings in the flesh. They was all from the BBC. It was all done via email. This is as far as my recollection goes. So stalking, just define what stalking actually is. And can we agree that stalking is fucking weird?
Well, it's not weird. It's appalling, and it's indefensible. The dictionary definition of stalking, and those who are convicted of true stalking, for example, most recently, 2 Heart DJs had a stalker. Curiously, he got a suspended sentence. He'd sent things, he'd emailed, he'd turned up at the studios. That, to me, is stalking. Curiously, a suspended sentence, which is often the way. I didn't have that privilege of getting a suspended sentence like the convicted paedophile Hugh Edwards from the BBC, who likes to watch children being raped. I went to prison, as you say, for 5.5 years as a sentence which you serve half. However, if you're on a non-violent, non-sexual, non-drugs related crime, anybody else would have gone to what's called DCAT, open prison, which I was eligible for within days, but never got because the MOJ didn't allow it because of my profile. And as we sit here today, I've been gagged, as I say, for just over 4 months because of my profile. Not because I've done anything wrong, because if I'd done anything wrong when you're on licensed conditions, I would have been taken back to prison. So we know I've done nothing wrong that is serious or anything that would even remotely cross a line, because I'm sat here. They are monitoring me currently as a MAPA 2 level 3 criminal, which is terrorism level monitoring, the highest possible monitoring, despite my recidivism, which is my likelihood of serious reoffending, being 0.17%. So none of this really makes sense. But in answer to your question, of course, stalking is absolutely abhorrent, and those who do it have traits that are absolutely clear and defined by psychologists. They tried to stitch me up with psychologists in prison, and they gave up after 4 hours and said there was nothing wrong with him. The following day, I was moved to another prison when I was told I'd be going home.
Did you put out a disinfectant and crack a joke immediately.
I am slipping all over this chair. I don't know what it is. Does the word moist mean anything to you, Liam?
I've had a few people sat there moist.
When you look at someone like Bonnie Blue in the eye, and you know what she's taken in the eye, is there not a moment where you think, how did my career end up in this position? And I don't mean missionary.
Nothing surprises me now. The world gets more and more mental by the day. So she'll be the least mental guest in about 5 years' time. In fact, she'll probably be considered quite mild the way we're going.
The reason I'm sat here today is because your story is so extraordinary, and actually mine isn't. It started in 2019, and prior to that, I am probably the most boring man on earth. And I think what disappointed Nottingham Police, the MOJ and the Home Office is when they raided me 3 times illegally without a warrant, 2 of which were no further actioned. I was strip searched for 1 of them. I was arrested 5 times. Nottingham Police are currently investigating that, and we will get to that in a bit. But they found nothing. There was no evidence found on my phones, on my laptops, or in the house. And I think what they hoped was that I would be as bad as most people in show business who are up to something. And this business does tend to attract very, very weird, strange people who are often spectrumed, who are often, people with letters after their name, for example, ADHD, PTSD, or in Piers Morgan's case, KFC. And these people have things in their closet that they don't particularly want to come out in the public domain. I am very boring, and I think what saddens my critics, and especially the mental trolls in their mother's back bedroom, is that there really isn't anything going on, because I'm probably the most transparent person in show business. I talk about everything, including the fact I have a micro penis. Now, you will have found this in the research. It's an affliction. It's an affliction that doesn't deserve laughter, but it does get me a blue badge.
You'd have found this in the research, right? How big's Alex's dick?
Bonnie Blue can confirm that this will be the future of YouTube, where her and I will have an allegiance once probation sign it off, that we will make £1 million between us by an intimate moment of horizontal jogging that I think will take the internet by storm. That's all I'm going to say.
They won't see it coming. Boom.
Outrageous.
Let me put something into perspective for people watching this, and they don't really understand about stalking. So knowing you was coming on today, last night I went onto Netflix and I typed in stalking, and a documentary come up. I think it was 6 or 7 parts. And to put things into perspective, the first stalker, admittedly it was America, but he sat in jail being interviewed. It was his 2nd time in there. But the first time he got imprisoned for stalking, it was against his ex-wife. It was repeatedly turning up unannounced, breaking into the home, caught with a knife, with a murder plan. So that's stalking with intent to murder, caught with a weapon, and he was very much on the spectrum. He had PDD or PPD, whatever it is, or PPE.
Don't mention Michelle Moan.
No, he had a personality disorder, but you can clearly see that, and he's aware of it. All of those things considered, 7 years was his sentence. So yours was 18 months shy of that when you think of what he done. So let's take it all the way back so people can wait for the juice and we'll find out more about you, your career. Let's go back to 95. Is that when you joined the BBC?
Yeah, so I've never done a proper job, and I always knew that this would be my best friend. I always wanted a microphone. I don't know how I knew. I always knew that I love people.
Was you into dramatics at school?
No, not into theatre at all. I got slapped over the wrist for using the word twirly. I don't particularly like twirly types, lovies. I don't like people who generally have pink hair and nose piercings and go around singing songs from Wicked. They're quite annoying. But I do love talent. And the one thing as a kid I was mesmerised by was music and the piano. And I started playing the piano at about 4. And I also realised, a bit like being a barber, that if I just focused on one talent, it would pay me the rest of my life. And it did. It bought my house, playing the piano for little old ladies in care homes at 12 years old, touring Nottinghamshire. I did a world tour of the East Midlands. And it was all about the rebooking. And then I fell in love with a guy who I thought was tremendous, Ken Dodd, who was my hero and mentor. And from the age of 14, he showed me the ropes of theatre and also taught me the pitfalls of theatre and theatre types and how many crooked people there are, how many weird people there are, and how many shysters there are. And for the next 20 odd years, I went on the road with Ken. up and down the country, and Lady Anne was so kind, and he taught me how to be funny and find the funny. He never laughed. If you told him a funny joke, he never laughed. He was too busy remembering it. And from that, I had the best insight in how to behave. And contrary to the belief of he's a loose cannon, which they love to say, the BBC loved to say that, he was a loose cannon. Actually, I'm not. I might be on air more outrageous than everyone else, but the reality is everybody's so fucking boring. You don't have to say anything to be outrageous. What I do is ad lib, and what I never had was a script. And they can't bear that, because journalists, who are the most boring hypocrites I've ever encountered in my entire life, and they're all generally the same, only work on the written word that's mostly written by someone else. They don't have the ability to sit opposite each other like we are today and just talk, because they need a script. And that's why actors aren't my favourite people, because they too are the most boring guests. You ask them a question and they don't know how to answer it because it's not written down for them. I want it to be fun. And my mentors, as I say, Ken in this country I work with, and then in America I found a guy called Howard Stern and a guy called David Letterman. Now, David was the king of the one-liner. He did a monologue at the beginning of his show for 40 years, and Stern is still the highest paid broadcaster in America, but the antichrist of broadcasting and the highest fined broadcaster ever. And on 9/11, for example, he asked all the Times Square hookers to give free blowjobs to the firemen because they were very tired and drained. Now, he was bringing levity to a situation. And then I found people like Lisa Lampanelli and Joan Rivers, who were phenomenal comedians, who were fearless. And all of them had the same philosophy: never apologize. And we have a culture now where when somebody offends someone, and I've never given offense in my life, ever. You might take it, that's your problem. I don't apologize, because if I said something, I mean it, because I'm not stupid. I'm not an imbecile that just says things. I say what I think. Now, that offends people, and in this climate, it can end your career and land you in prison. But I believe we should live in a world where words, and I go back to my original statement, cannot be, under any circumstances, as offensive as a man who watches a child being raped. I don't believe it. I cannot fathom how just yesterday I see another paedophile up in Newcastle get a suspended sentence, just like Hugh Edwards, the highest paid PDF file at the BBC. I can't fathom how we have virtually decriminalized watching the rape of children, yet criminalized those who make fun, those who ridicule, those who mock, which is me. That's what kills them. It's the mockery they can't stand. They couldn't bear at the BBC that I didn't take them seriously. And what the system's finding now is they don't like the fact that I'm not taking this part of it seriously either, because I think it's a joke. And I'll explain that to you over the next hour if you're interested, why I can't take these people seriously.
I'm very interested, but I want to get it in date order. I want the journey, really. I want to know, because it's a big build-up. You've had a very interesting career, very successful career, and then for it to end in the well, it's probably only just begun. But that little stint you had, where it's very turbulent, where you was in jail, I just want to know how the fucking hell it ended up there. So, 95, you've joined the BBC as a radio DJ?
Yeah, so I'd started entertaining from 12. So I went out with my keyboard and went to all little old ladies' homes, old cockeries, as I call them, and for 25 quid, I'd sit there for an hour, and everybody laughed at me, and a lot of people still do. The trolls love to laugh at that. They think that's funny. Well, I think it's the most beautiful thing to go in a room of people who are so grateful that you've taken the time to sit and give your talent to them. And as a kid, I went in and I was higher paid than anybody else at school. So laugh away.
You see, if I was to say everything that I thought during interviews, I'd just be interrupting all the time. But when you told me about you're playing music to the elderly, I thought, fucking, that's beautiful. When you said about Ken Dodd, I thought, wow, I didn't know that. So, but I won't keep interrupting, telling you the bits that I love and I don't. I'm just letting you flow.
Listen,
because
it's a conversation. And what's amazing about someone like you or me sitting together is, I don't know 1% of what's in your head. And I'm interested in the 99% I don't know. Stupid people and morons just see what's in front of them. My whole life as a kid, as I believe you are, is about what we don't know. And I think what scares my enemies is that my curiosity is what sets me aside from most of my colleagues in journalism. They don't even like to accept I am a journalist even though that's what I've done for my entire career and was at the BBC, the very BBC that put me in jail. This was all from the BBC.
I was going to say, are you a journalist, comedian, entertainer, presenter?
Well, they hate that. They don't like it because they can't put me in a box. I'm all of those things. I love to entertain. When I did my live show in Blackpool to 1,300 people sold out, I did the piano for a bit. I had friends on who were comedians. I ranted and raved like a madman. Listen, you don't have to be one thing, but in this autistic society, and I mean that in its literal sense, which is retarded, which I mean in its literal sense, we are held backwards by our own boxed thinking. I don't like that. Why can't I be serious 1 minute and taking the piss the next? Why can't I do a joke about Bonnie Blue, but equally be accepted to be able to make a sensible point about world affairs or Keir Starmer, our dictator that wants to stop anybody like me from saying the things that he doesn't particularly like? Why can't I be both? And this is something that is unique to Britain. In America, they're much better at accepting that. You know, Jim Davidson over here is the best example. And he told me once, you know, that Lorraine Heggessy did not like him at the BBC and paid him $1 million to fuck off, right? Of your money, public money. And the reason was she couldn't get her head round how he could do theatres on a Friday night, R18, and do Generation Game on a Saturday night at 6 o'clock. And Jim says it very simply. He's not stupid. He knows he can say fuck there and he can't say it there. Why can't we be more grown up? Why do we have to be so regimented in who we are and what we do? I think the reason my audience love me, and I had the most exponential rise, I think, ahead of the curve, ahead of everyone else. I see Ant and Dec are currently about to launch their podcast. Good luck with that. You know, to find an audience online and be compelling and interesting is very, very difficult. And they have called it hanging out with Ant and Dec. And they did a poster with them on a washing line. And feeble, stupid people said, it's triggered me because it looks like they're hanging themselves. We now live in an infantilized world where you can't even have a poster with two guys hanging out. And let's face it, it's not the first time that Ant's been suspended. Little joke there for you. It's a joke, by the way, if we could add in some laughter. Why can't I make a good political point, which is, why is it Ant got his career back? But so many people don't. Why is it he's forgiven, but, for example, Michael Barrymore isn't, or John Leslie wasn't? Why is it we pick and choose who can have a second chance and who can't? I find that riveting. And these are the questions, hello, David Walliams, that they don't like me asking.
I want to ask you about David Walliams before we go back to your BBC career. And I'll ask the question now because we'll come back to it because I can see that you go off on a tangent.
Of course.
10 of your 16 years in the BBC was a whistleblower, so I want to come back to that and find out exactly what that entails. But as you've mentioned, David Walliams, he used to get teenagers up on stage and play hide the sausage. Now, when I first saw that, I thought, now that's odd. I don't ever remember that being acceptable, even back in the day. Fully grown men getting teenagers up, sort of touching them up on stage, being all fucking weird. And you must know of him better than me, being in the industry. Do you think he's got stuff that he should be concerned about coming out in the wash?
Well,
this is speculation, but I'm curious as to what you think.
I've interviewed Matt and David a few times. I know Matt better than I know David. But curiously, I bumped into Matt Lucas just after 9/11, believe it or not, in New York. And Matt had just lost his husband, who had killed himself. And I was very nice to Matt, and we went about our business. And then I saw him a few months later when he was in the West End. I think he was in a show called Taboo, which was a Boy George musical. And we talk about those who get second chances. I mean, Boy George just did pantomime. This is a man who tied a rent boy up to a radiator and is forgiven because he doesn't worry about the karma in the chameleon. Listen, it's funny how we choose to forget. Now, Matt has been one of the most vicious celebrants of my demise. David said nothing, but Matt has gone to great effort, like the likes of Jason Manford. And I asked myself, why would you attack a person? And I say this to all the mental trolls, the medicated people in their mother's back bedrooms who spend their lives obsessing about someone they've never met, they don't know. why would you choose to dance on someone's grave who has only ever been polite about you, who has only ever said nice things? Now, one of the rhetorical things that gets said about me that I can't react to, by definition, is that they just have to say something. You don't. You don't have to say something, and it's not aging well. And I'm about to have some bombshells that's going to make a lot of people look very stupid. And when you're someone like Matt Lucas, who is the partner of David Walliams, who is at the very least creepy, and I can say that editorially because the man goes on stage and takes down other young men's trousers in front of thousands, and Matt commends him on his attempted buggery, quote unquote, and then says, how old are you? 16. And he says, perfect. Now, you can say what you like about me, and many do. I've never stood on a stage, and I've stood on thousands over 30 years, thousands of stages, and never looked for the youngest man in the audience to pull down his pants, show his arse on stage, and pretend to fuck him. So I say, he who cast the first stone, be very careful when you point fingers, because there's quite a few pointing back. And to Matt and to Jason and all the others that loved the fact that I was gagged and silenced, I simply asked myself the question, why? Jason Manford, a man that was got rid of the one show because of a web wank. Okay, listen, you want to point fingers and you want to start celebrating other people's demise. It only in my head begs questions. And that's what I do as a journalist. I say to myself, how has David Walliams been able to get away with this for a long time? And let me tell you, a bit like John Barrowman, you know, it has been openly known for decades that this man loves to get his cock out. It was unfortunate that somebody outed him during his time at Doctor Who, and his career, as far as I can see, has virtually ended. He certainly isn't doing pantomime anymore, where he used to do it in the wings. Listen, I've got a micropenis. I don't want to get my cock out. But even if I was hung like a rhinoceros, I wouldn't do it. They choose to. We all make choices. And I think David Walliams and Barrowman and all these other people who have got away with it for too long will regret it, because this is a culture now where everybody's stabbing everybody in the front, never mind the back. And you can run, but you can't hide. I sit here opposite you today, Liam, knowing this. Nottingham police, who are currently investigating themselves, raided my house 3 times. They took all of my equipment, including my microphone. Curious. Why did they take my microphone? And they found fuck all. Nothing. Nothing, not one piece of evidence. I wonder whether certain people, if they had their equipment taken and their houses raided, would be as innocent and as squeaky clean as me. That's all I'll say.
The 10 years of the 16 in the BBC as a whistleblower.
Yep.
What is a whistleblower? I mean, most people will know, and what were you whistleblowing on?
So I started at the BBC about 15, 16, answering phones for a lovely lady called Lisa Dransford, I think her name was, Lisa Lynch at the time, at Radio Nottingham. And I love Radio Nottingham. My biggest hero locally was Dennis McCarthy. And at his funeral, he had horses, and there were thousands, and there were people queuing outside the cathedral to remember him and to celebrate his life. And he was the greatest local broadcaster of all time because he knew his audience. Most people don't know their audience. And I've made my craft a science. I take it very seriously. It might look like I'm pissing about, but I know my audience, and you have to. And that's why certain people like Nigel Farage have got to be very careful, because when you're trying to be something or pretending to be something that maybe you're not at core, i.e. in terms of allegiance with people like Tommy Robinson, for example, you've got to be very careful, because when you distance yourself from someone like that, someone like me who might think I want to vote for reform might go, well, maybe this isn't the party for me if you don't like him. So by association, you have to be very, very careful who you associate with and who you don't. And I'm very aware of that, and I always was. I was lucky because I got a great chance through Dennis to see how to do radio properly and connect with people. And I think I know I'm the only one on YouTube that successfully did a phone-in entirely on YouTube. And isn't it interesting The week where YouTube beat the BBC are doing a deal with YouTube for content, and I guarantee it will end up with them putting live content on, meaning that you'll have to pay your license fee to watch YouTube. That's what that's about. They're very cunning. And the great thing about you and I is we are not dependent or reliant on that rape tax of £170 a year that you have to pay to have a square box in the corner of your room. But people don't realize that is only for live streaming. It is not for watching YouTube or anything else. It is only for live content. That's what your license fee's for. So if you don't watch live TV and you watch YouTube and think you don't need it, I think that will change. And remember, the BBC are the mouthpiece for the government. They are public service broadcasters. Okay. And they are there during COVID to tell you to get the jab, stay at home, and protect the NHS. That's why I, on YouTube, chose to go the other way and say, why are we at home? Why are we wearing masks that don't work? And why are we jabbing children that's killing people? That makes you very unpopular because there's so many of our isn't it interesting how many people have joined us on YouTube who just 3 or 4 years ago said that the future was on ITV or the BBC? Isn't it funny how they're now seeing the future is actually where we've been? So when I went to the BBC at 15, I looked around me at Radio Nottingham and could not believe the kind of people that they protected, even back then as a child. The kind of behaviour that was covered up. I saw presenters who threw things at the wall at producers. I saw creepy journalists that took young men out to dinner and then would take them home and offer them promotions. I saw things that were unthinkable with women, sexual harassment by managers that's covered up. I saw it all and I stored it in my head. And I kept working and working. And some people think I'm aloof. If you ask any colleagues of mine, does he come for drinks with you? No, I don't, because I don't like what I see and I don't like what you get up to. And I'm very, very lucky that I've got a network of friends and family that I've never needed to be popular in the business.
So you're building a case as you're going along?
Well, I didn't know I was at the time. There was one particular man at Radio Nottingham who I just remember just as a child thinking, don't go near him. It was the weirdest thing. It was like I had a sixth sense. And just you wait, it's going to come out. It will all come out. And then I progressed to Radio Leicester, where I did my own shows, and Century opened, which was the first regional station. And that's when my eyes were really opened, what you could get away with. Amazing people like Scotty McClue, who are no longer working, and great broadcasters led by John Myers, the greatest radio programmer in this country, who ended up creating Smooth and died at the 18th hole of Glen Eagles. What a place to have a heart attack. Isn't that fantastic? And he taught me everything, and we became friends to the very end. And then I carried on. But I was always aloof with the comedy as my background, learning my trade, inspired by Bob Monkhouse, loving Letterman, fascinated by Stern, learning. You got to learn. And you know what? There's too much arrogance in this business. People think anybody can sit behind a microphone and be interesting. You can't. You can't. You just can't. To interview properly, shutting up is the main thing. You know, I told you the other day when I did Barry Manilow in Las Vegas, the first thing they said was, "Don't mention he's gay." So I said, "Barry, how are you?" And he said, "Young man, I'm great since I came out. It's wonderful." Well, there you go. You've opened the door, and we did a great 40 minutes. I think I spoke for 3 minutes in 40. You shut up. You let your guests talk. All that stuff like you're doing brilliantly. But all these fucking morons from TV who have no personality think they can all do a podcast. I look at the ratings. I'm a ratings guy. I made a lot of money on YouTube, trust me. A lot of money. And I look at these people who are getting 30,000. I just saw that blonde girl, I don't know what she's on Radio 2 or something, interviewing Anton Deck. 37,000 hits. Anton Deck. These are guys who are on 9 million a year at ITV, who are the number one people. You can only find less than 40,000. This is telling. And what's exposing about YouTube that I love, you can't hide. You can't hide. There's no place to hide. The ratings are there, the likes are there, and the comments will decide. And to move forward to when I came out of prison, the greatest thing on earth is the comments. You can't edit them.
We haven't spoken about your whistleblowing yet.
I know, I will answer it eventually. How long have we got left? Another 3 hours. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is through the period of going through the BBC, through Radio Nottingham, through Radio Leicester, then at Radio Leeds, and in between I did 30 radio stations. So they gave me the amazing opportunity to have my own production company, which was called Celebrity Radio, and I interviewed all kinds of stars all over the world for over 10 years under my own name, under my own belt, under my own cost. I sold it to each radio station. I'm the first and only person who ever did that in BBC Local Radio. And this was at 20, 21, 22. Flying to Vegas, I did Belfield on Broadway. It was a tax write-off. So I could go and have my fortnight on Broadway, interview a few stars, see a few good shows, stay in a 5-star hotel, write it off, came back. Brilliant. This was the most amazing, blessed career. I did it for 15, 20 years. It was the most beautiful thing. And I went to Vegas, which is my spiritual home, not so much now because it's too expensive, but I interviewed everyone, like David Copperfield, for example, who I know has also had his opinions about me because I didn't give him a 5-star review. And I understand he was quite glad when he found out that I'd gone to prison. I was quite glad last week when I looked in the Daily Mail and saw him in a dressing gown with his legs round Ghislaine Maxwell.
Oh, yes.
You know that thing about pointing fingers? Mm-hmm. I've never fucked a convicted paedophile.
Yeah, old sins cast long shadows.
Listen, there's a lovely line that I just love, and it's so true, is if you wait by the river long enough, the corpses will float past you. So powerful.
Yeah, true enough.
So powerful. I can't say anything right now. My lawyers are working hard. I'm just watching around me. And I knew one day David Walliams would be caught out. For too long, there are things that have been public. Now, where whistleblowing goes wrong, or right, depending on which way you look at it, is you then get other jobs. So it all went wrong at the BBC when I asked for a pay rise, having got the biggest ratings in 7 years at BBC Radio Leeds, where I did mid-morning and I beat breakfast. You can't do that. They've got teams of journalists who will not be undermined by some gobshite from the north who's going to come on and do knob gags and get a bigger audience than news. The BBC won't allow it. Liam, I asked for 50 quid more a show, and they said no. For the best figures in 7 years.
Why do you think that is? Is that power play?
Of course. They can't fathom in their special head, their very specific way of thinking, that a man with a gob could get a bigger audience than a journalist with a pen. They can't fathom any of that. So when I asked for 50 quid more, they said no, so I resigned. And that's where it went wrong. Then another door opened, and that door was ITV. I went and did warm-up at Loose Women for 2 years.
What is warm-up?
So warm-up is where, it's, by the way, the hardest job I've ever done in show business.
And just quick, before we move on, what was you blowing the whistle on? And then we'll box that off.
Okay, so over the period of 15 years I was at the BBC, and from age of 15 I'm only 32, by the way, but from the age of 15, which was 1995, through until 2011, I was at the BBC at 32 radio stations. So I didn't get to the punchline, but these celebrity specials ended up on 32 radio stations, BBC stations, every Easter, Christmas. So I was everywhere, and it was amazing. And I'm very, very grateful to those editors who took that. So I knew everyone in every radio station. It was fantastic. But during this period, I did cover all over the country, in Bristol, in Birmingham, in Nottingham, in I'd been in all these radio stations, and I saw things that I thought were despicable. I also used to work out of Radio 2 at Wogan House, as it was then. In the basement were the studios where you could do network interviews, and I'd run into Tito Jackson 1 minute or Chris Evans the next minute, and they'd just come in and they'd do a chat for these celebrity specials. And they tell you stuff. I don't mean those two specifically, but you would find out stuff by being in those buildings. You know, the BBC is a monolith that is so enormous, less so now because they're seeing that they're going to have to become a business. And of course they did. And I was the first to say, what's that thing on the front of Broadcasting House? And somebody said, it's a statue. I said, I'm not fucking stupid. I know it's a statue. What's it called? And it's called Ariel. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? And Ariel is an angel with a boy with his cock out, a baby, by a man called Eric Gill. And Eric Gill went to prison for raping his 2 daughters and the family dog. And I said to myself, why would you have the statue on the front of your building by a paedophile? And then Operation U-Tree happened. And now we see what I believed back in 1995, that the management at the BBC will cover anything for anyone if it protects the BBC. And they're not alone, by the way. So when I went to ITV, I thought, well, this could never happen. And I ended up doing warm-up, which is doing the comedy and the adverts. You warm the audience up as they come in. I loved it, by the way. It was during the good days before that show went woke, and it's just appalling now. Nobody watches it, and it's full of people who have no opinions, with a few exceptions of people who are still stuck there. A couple of mates are still there. But other than that, the good old days of Carol McGiffin and Jane McDonald, where they just say anything for laughs. Now it's woke, and it has to be all about periods and mental health and all this shite that nobody wants to watch. And we were in the studios with This Morning and other shows, and people like Philip Schofield. And I was the one, we can't say the name, I'm sure, because I'm sure I'll end up back in another court. This kid's name I put on the internet, and it went viral because we all knew. We were there and we saw it with our own eyes. And I won't name other people who are much bigger than me, but there are other far more famous and successful journalists than I who were appalled by it and didn't stop until it came out. And the kid that was involved in this story wasn't the only kid that came to me who was the grooming is a very interesting word, but I believe if you go into a place of young people, which is what I saw at the BBC a lot, and you encourage young people to follow you on social media, and then the next minute they're doing work experience, and the next minute they're in the building, and the next minute you're fucking them in a dressing room, that's grooming, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't approve of it, and I don't like it. And the Philip Schofield was the first thing that made me realise this is across the whole of show business. And then we get to 2019, where I think I became Tommy 2.0 in the eyes of the Home Office, because I was approached by a girl who was at a theatre school, a dance school in Yorkshire, who said that 9 girls had been sexually assaulted by a sound man and producer. And the parents wanted to do something, and would I cover it on my channel? Because I'd, by this point, become very damning of the practices of TV, the people within it, and producers, and the casting couch, which still goes on. A predatory business. That's why they hate me in show business, because this still happens today. The Epstein world is absolutely prevalent, where people use their authority and power to do things they shouldn't be doing. And they wondered if I would investigate this as a journalist. Now, you started this interview asking about stalking. Being a journalist and a stalker, investigating, which is what I did, and then turning it into something else to cover up, and I'll explain why. So in 2019, 9 parents gave me the names and addresses, date of births, and contact details to give to the police. I had got the name of this guy who had undeniably taken one of the girls into a car park after a pantomime, grabbed her around the throat and sexually assaulted her. And I went to South Yorkshire Police and reported it. And I was told 2 days later, if I named him, I would be arrested. He was no further actioned, and he now currently works for a holiday camp in this country. I believe that put me on the system, whatever the dark forces are that run that system, where they saw me of great danger that I could be Tommy Part 2, with a huge platform and influence. And this was the first time I heard this thing about your profile and your influence, which they absolutely 100% have weaponized in my case. I'm the first person to be convicted of something, I believe, by someone who didn't exist over something that didn't happen. In other words, they said they didn't fear me, that's on public record. But somebody who watched me may do something that could be criminal, even though they didn't and they didn't exist. So I believe that singular moment in 2019 And the Philip expose and my style, which was fearless, is why I'm in this mess today, because the whole system and show business and the BBC and ITV realized I was independent. That's the point, Liam. I was not beholden to the BBC. I did not require their approval. I did not no longer need the paymasters of ITV to keep me to the life to which I've become accustomed.
And are they institutionalised in the BBC?
The brainwashing that goes on in these big companies, and I don't think ITV is that dissimilar.
Right.
They will cover up anything to protect their talent. And when it's somebody like Schofield or Barrowman, and I'm not comparing all of their activities as equal, because they're not. I do not believe getting your cock out on the side of a stage like Barrowman did, and he admitted, is equivalent to what Hugh Edwards did. I think the two are completely different and should be treated as such. But as I know too well, I serve the same sentence as if I'd have raped somebody. Now, the question is why is no one calling this out? Why does everybody bury their head in the sand? Because of money, influence, and power. And it's going on today. And the reason I'm in this mess is fear of the truth.
Let's get into the mess. Now, you've done a great job of answering most of the questions that I had in my mind to ask you. So that's flowed real nice. Let's get into the meat and gravy of it. So how did the stalking, how did that begin? Talk me through the whole journey, the back and forth, the emails, from start to finish, and I'll just let you roll with it.
Okay.
This is your side of the story now, not the BBC's.
I understand, but I have to be very careful. I am on licensed conditions. Let's explain where we are.
And this is why I won't pepper you with questions, so you can just do it in your own time, in your own words.
And it's not that I'm avoiding anything or don't want to talk. I will be recalled to prison. I can't. There is one specific thing that I'm not even going to mention that I can't do. The rest is covered by free speech. Now let's talk about today, if we can. If we could just move to today before I explain that.
Okay.
It's taken me 4 months to be able to sit here with you. They told me on September 12th, the day before Tommy's rally, having been banned from London because they were so scared of what I might say or do, because I'm such a risk. I haven't spoken for 132 days, 4 months, because they told me I'm banned from this and I'm banned from the internet, and I'm not. They ended up, after we've sent a legal letter, which is 13, this is where we're at. I've just spent £8,000 on this, right? And we're nowhere near it. This is all the violations of my human rights. My private life, Article 8, Article 10, free speech. This has cost £8,000 for my barrister, who has worked harder than anyone I've ever met in the legal profession. And you know what they say? They're going to get back in 3 months. The scum-sucking pond life at the MOJ firstly said they didn't know who I was. Then they write back and say, we need 3 months to consider your human rights. I believe once you leave prison, the Human Rights Act kicks in, the Rehabilitation Act kicks in, and that puts me on a level playing field to you. It has to by law. Yet I am banned from being seen, talking. They cancelled my tour. That costs £100,000 to cancel 2 tours. We're not talking chicken shit money. They banned my mug with my mugshot on. They said you can't bring out the books. It's lies. But I have to go through this horse shit with my barristers and my team to even be here with you. And finally last week, Liam, they said, we can't stop you doing interviews. For 4 months, they've led me to believe that they could. When I came out of prison, they said, you're on curfew. I said, what does that mean? They said, if you want to go out after midnight, you have to tell us. I said, well, no, a curfew means I can't go out after midnight. Oh, no, if you tell us where you're going and who you're with, you can go. I had to play by their rules. 2 weeks later, MAPA, the mafia who are managing me, that's 18 people.
Who are MAPA?
They are the people who are all the parties that are, I believe, a mafia. Invisible people working together to manage me with my 0.17% risk. That's their figure, not mine, by their own algorithms over a 64-page document, right? They've decided I'm very high risk, so I need MAPA, as is the case with Lucy Connolly. We're identical, okay, in our treatment by this country, both over words. We must not forget that. I know words, absolutely, you have a responsibility that your words can hurt people's feelings, or indeed they come with consequences. But it was a non-violent, non-sexual, non-drugs related conviction, right? Now, I'm sat here having been told you're on curfew, right? After midnight, I have to say I'm with Liam. We're going to the pub. And they either say I can or I can't. As it turns out, they never said I couldn't do anything. So when I'd go to London, for example, for dinner, come back on the train, fine. It was ruled by MAPA, this mafia of people I don't know who are unaccountable, that was unlawful 2 weeks after I came out of prison. And within 1 month, it was in the MAPA mafia notes that I get through subject access. Thank God for the Data Protection Act in this country, which allows you to see the details of what they're talking about you behind your back. You're able to get those documents. The next meeting, they said it's unlawful, it needs to be dropped. They told me on November the 11th. For 4 fucking months, they lied that I was under curfew. I was not. Now, how can you trust a system that will just lie to you, as they've done with my banning of free speech? Article 10 protects me under ECHR that I'm allowed free speech, right? Free speech. I haven't done anything wrong because I'm not back in prison, let's be clear. My license conditions say you can't go on the internet. But how? Then I push this and I say, I'm doing an interview with Liam. And they say, okay. And I went, you've been telling me for 4 months I can't speak. They're liars. They're compulsive liars for their own agenda, which is shushy, shush, shush, shush. All they want is for me to shut the fuck up and die. Because if I'm shushed or dead, and I believe that was their intent, none of this that's about to come out will be exposed.
Did you think you're supposed to be dead?
I am absolutely meant to be dead. They did not believe a journalist who lives the kind of lifestyle I've led, which is not your life. Listen, I know a lot about you from what I've seen. I don't know 1/10 of what's gone on in your head, but I know we don't live the same life. I'm a boring guy who goes to dinner every night and sees nice people and has never had any trouble in his life.
What are you saying,
prior
Alex?
to this?
And I weren't playing the piano at 12.
Try Googling yourself. And I might do that with Bonnie Blue. The truth is, as I said at the beginning, there's nothing going on. I'm not from your background, or indeed, I've not had the torture you've had. I've not had life's toil that you've had. I've had a very blessed life. I've worked my arse off. Don't get me wrong. I've fought for everything. I've never been given anything, but I haven't had abuse.
This is why I thought it was very peculiar that you would get such a strong sentence for emails.
Well, as I say, there are things I can't talk about, but what we do know is the entire file was given by the BBC. And you say to yourself, why? Well, I showed you earlier, I brought some papers because, you know, the trolls love to say he's lying, or the critics like to say it's not true. 2 documents that are really, really important that were banned from the trial until the very last day were 2 security reports done by BBC Security independently at 2 separate periods. And they were done because people within the BBC, and I said at the very beginning of all of this, it was a witch hunt. Now, let me explain why I believe that. If a load of people come together who want you off air for nefarious reasons and are using all kinds of tentacles within their power to do so, to me, that's a witch hunt. When this one's confiding in this one, and this one's playing with this one. I haven't promoted the books yet, by the way. Can't release that one, but this one's quite good. Can we talk about the books, or is that no? Okay, we'll do that later.
We'll get to that.
So these it's the only way I've got to earn a living these days. I'm banned from everything. Even having a shite in the morning, they say it's banned. It's in my license conditions. So they all grouped together at the BBC to shut me down because of emails where I was taking the piss. Now, let's start with the emails. They said some people love to write. There was 4,000 emails. Well, it's kind of true. It's kind of true because as a journalist, I used to use freedom of information to do my stories. So after I left the BBC in 2011, when they wouldn't pay me £50 more a show for being the most successful DJ in 7 years, I then worked for The Sun, The Mail, and The Mirror. Okay. and then ended up at the Express and all other papers too, but mainly those three. Liam, it's a lot of money, what they pay for stories. There wasn't a week in 10 years I didn't have a page lead. That is to say, an entire page of a newspaper. That's between $750 and $2,000, right? This is a business. I mean, show business. Ken Dodd taught me that. It's 2 words, show business, right? And I made my business exposing the BBC as a whistleblower via FOI. So every single day, I would think of questions as ridiculous as, how many taxis have you booked that you haven't used? It's thousands. How many hotels have you booked and not used? It's thousands. And then we got a little thing called BBC Studios. BBC Studios is the private business of the BBC that now owns all the family jewels. Strictly, the One Show, Top Gear, everything is not owned by us anymore. And they were fucking livid that I was finding out, because I knew, having been there, that, for example, I came here today and it cost me a fortune on the train. They're very expensive. They have BBC Travel who sell you a ticket on account at probably at least a third or double the price, right? So I went to my boss and I said, I won't travel standard for business. If I'm going to London for you to record an interview, you need to send me first. We can't. I said, well, here's the deal. You've just bought me a £230 ticket from Leeds to London, which is an open standard ticket. I can go first class for £56 return. She had to get it signed off by 3 levels higher than her. So I saved the BBC £200 a ticket to go first class. That's the BBC in a nutshell. So I spent my whole time for 10 years thinking of all the things they didn't want you to know, like how much it costs to change a light bulb. It's hundreds of pounds. Liam, you're not allowed up a ladder because of health and safety. We have to get a man in. It's obscene. Do you know how many dinners they have? How many sandwich plates they have delivered to BBC buildings? Do you know how many just endless wastes of coffee machines? There's something like 35 coffee machines in Broadcasting House. Free coffee. Buy your own fucking coffee. This is public money. And what they hated was, I always fought it for the public. You're paying for these people to book a taxi to a hotel, neither of which they use. Flights are the same. And of course, I would get front page on the Daily Mail, Mail on Sunday, Sun. I was the one who did a lot on IR35, which is where the BBC wouldn't pay people like me. I was the one who started that in the court. And they said it was vexatious. That is to say, my claim had no backing or authority or reason to be in a court. On the very same day, it was the front page of the Times. And I took that into the judge and said, how can it be on the front page of the Times of London? And this is vexatious. And they lost. That resulted in hundreds of freelance people at the BBC getting staff contracts. I fought for people, and they hate it because they have contempt for public money.
For the record, because obviously I can't back somebody if I haven't seen it with my own eyes. I can ask you questions and take your answer at face value, but unless I've seen it, I can't say I've seen it. I asked you to bring your receipts with you, and you have bought me a chopping great wad of legal bills, which are fucking astronomical. So I will back you on that because I've seen it with my own eyes, and I've read it, and I've examined each and every page. And I mean,
and by the way,
it's for you to disclose the amount, but I've seen that.
Well, this one here is 26,400. Now, what the reason? 15,170, 10,410. 255, that was a good one. 6,406. Look, they're all here. I mean, just pages and pages. Listen.
Well, I've seen them.
Right. So when you were accused of being a grifter, it's born out of some reality. So at the point I was fucked, and I knew I was fucked because those lawyers were asking for 25 grand here and 25 grand there. I asked all my fans, if you enjoy my content, which was for free at that point on YouTube, there wasn't alexbelfield.com where we'd got the subscription to do the news and all. It was all free on YouTube. Would you give me £1 towards my legal bills? Now, it's something like £450,000 I've now spent on lawyers since this started. Do you really think I could have got £450,000 from £1 donations? It's impossible. It's there in black and white. Needless to say, I've never had an investigation or an accusation of any fraud. There has never been anybody looking through the paperwork saying you've done this or you've done that, not even a scintilla of accusation. So it's bullshit. But this is what they love to do on the left, the radical left, these horrible, nasty mishkites that spend their life tearing down people they want to be because their lives are so small and pathetic, will say anything to discredit you. And the easiest way is to try and make out you're stealing from your fans. Now, it doesn't wash when you work with facts, and I like pieces of paper. So I said to you about the BBC security, and they did 2 independent reports. It still doesn't meet the threshold for harassment, was one of their reports. The second report, which was 2 years later, says, the messages are non-threatening and pose no risk to BBC staff. I don't know whether you can see that there. Poses no risk to BBC staff. So the emails I was sending to FOI were hundreds, if not thousands. Of course they were. But you're perfectly entitled. It's called freedom of information. What they cleverly then do is fuck you by conflating that in a courtroom to make it sound like you were emailing lots of people lots of times. The reality was, I think there were 26 emails disclosed in my entire court case over 10 years. FOI is not part of harassment. It can't be. And their own security department twice investigated me on the say-so of their paymasters and couldn't find anything. But why was that not allowed in court until the last day is a very interesting question.
Yeah, so how did it all start and how did it all snowball up until the first arrest? Because I'd imagine that you were sat there one day thinking you've done nothing wrong. All of a sudden, I'd imagine you got a knock on the door. Is that pretty much how it went? So how did it snowball up to that point?
There are things I can't say because of things that I'm prevented from saying. And one day I pray I can. And I wish one day I could come back and speak freely. So there was a campaign to close me down. That's public domain. That was in open court. The BBC handed a file to the police. The police then arrested me 5 times. They arrested me 3 times, one of which was for a bomb threat at the BBC, which they didn't believe it was a bomb threat because they didn't bring the bomb squad. They brought the STI van, which was, I think it's called the STI van, and it's the goons who come round, but they stupidly took off their lapels. So Nottingham Police are now investigating themselves over 13 issues, one of which is bail. So what they kept doing was increasing the bail, extending the bail, making the bail new and different, but of course that's not lawful. And in fact, I showed you a piece of paper earlier from Birmingham Magistrates Court that twice said they couldn't, but they did.
In your mind, was you thinking that this process is the punishment and it'll never get to court and jail?
Well, I said earlier they wanted me dead. I believe most people would give up. Most people would not have the tenacity to keep fighting. Most people would be absolutely beaten by the noise of this because, well, let's just start at the very basics. When 12 police officers come and arrest you, right, it's me, 12 people. That is to intimidate and bully, which is the same thing the probation service are doing now. They want to beat you into a pulp to be compliant. That's all they want. And for me, this started actually before I really rose to the fame that we did on YouTube and was selling theatre tickets all over the country. And that scared them more. And the reason they kept coming was we have to stop him and intimidating him into stopping. But I knew I was up to nothing. I knew there was nothing they were going to find. I knew I wasn't Hugh Edwards. And by the way, when I called the BBC a nonce factory, I did try and warn and tell people there are very powerful people at the top of the BBC who are the very worst creatures on earth. It's just a shame that our judiciary doesn't believe that what he did, that he's convicted of, paying for material which is paedophilic to a paedophile, is worth going to prison for in comparison to me. I understand where we stand, which is that words are deemed worse than watching a child being raped. I get it, but I don't like it.
You and me both.
And I won't stand for it.
You and me both.
This is despicable. And these people that think that this is acceptable and that they're pulling the wool over the eyes of the general public are very mistaken. Because when I went to prison, very kind people like Katie Hopkins, who I put on my show in Blackpool in 2022. We sold out 3 nights, the highest grossing weekend at the Pier. Sold out 3 nights. It was the most amazing thing ever.
Weren't you the one who sort of relaunched her career?
She couldn't get arrested. She hadn't been on a stage on TV or anything in 5 years. She'd been in America. And I didn't know her very well.
She couldn't get arrested?
She couldn't get, pardon the pun in this climate, that's a showbiz term. She could not get anything.
Right, okay.
Showbiz love. And she couldn't get a thing. And I saw this woman, and I know a glint in an eye when I see one. I think if I have any skill, it works 2 ways. I can read people very well, and I can smell bullshit from a mile off. And that is the greatest technique of any great communicator and broadcaster. If you can master it, I'm still learning every day, and I work hard to keep getting better at it. But I knew this woman was a tease, and I knew this woman was probably the greatest mockerist in show business. And people had missed the point. Any woman that can sit opposite Philip Schofield and have an argument about calling your children place names when you yourself have a child, which is a place name, clearly is taking the piss. And they missed it because they want to jump on the bandwagon. And what happened to her in the civil court, we'll get to lawfare at the very end, but I mean, what they've done to her was shocking. And I felt that was despicable, that a woman who could lose 20 grand for making a mistake through words could end up with £1 million legal bill and losing everything. And she lost everything for 5 years. I was the man that said, enough. She can come on my show, 50-50. I paid her half. There wasn't a fee. 50-50. She fucking stormed it. I loved the bones of the woman. And you know what? We did a couple more shows afterwards now. There isn't a theatre in this land she can't fill. Isn't that delicious? I love the fact that the public will decide, and with me and with you, Liam, they will decide. They will decide whether they believe me or they believe I'm bullshitting. They will decide whether they think this is real or fake. With Katie, I knew this woman had the same agenda as me, which I believe is the same agenda as so many of us who are fighting for truth. That you can't tell me that Lucy Connolly, who has become a dear friend in recent months, deserves to go to prison as a mother. But Hugh Edwards, the BBC's highest paid paedophile, who pays a paedophile to watch children being raped, doesn't go to prison. The public won't stand for this. They're too smart, Liam. We've had enough of it.
I think 4 years ago, people would have been in 2 minds. But since you've been in jail, I mean, people know about the BBC now. There's no hiding the fact that they're corrupt to the fucking core. And I've seen firsthand what they do to people when they want to shut them up. Bank accounts, PayPal, social media. You name it, they will come down and they will crush you, which is why I had no problem saying, your case stinks of shit. I want you to come on and share your story with me. Because I don't believe it.
I've not been able to do this, partly because I've not chosen to. So I'm my own worst enemy, which is the name of the autobiography, that maybe I should have done more interviews like this sooner. But I believed naively that the truth always wins in the end. I do not believe that anymore in this country. I believe we are in a dystopian nightmare that is getting worse by the day, that is unfortunately making people like me the villain, making others the villain, who actually... Listen, I'm a gobshite. I say things that, of course, are controversial, that some people won't like. But here's the difference between me and others, and the left, the radical far left. People I don't like, I ignore. Let me tell you, for example, I don't particularly like cyclists or vegans. I don't particularly like those orange-haired people with nose piercings who go and throw tomato ketchup all over paintings. I know what I'd do to them. I would avoid them. And I always have. I have to, because for my own sanity, I choose not. Look, for example, I love music. We talked about music on the thing the other day. I love music. I don't like jazz music very much. So guess what? I don't go to jazz concerts. If you don't like my opinions, what I don't understand is, why can't you switch off? What is it about me? People have said on record, I listened to everything he said in case he mentioned me. Why? Why? That's mental illness. Why would you indulge in something that you claim is some form of terror, some form of torture? And you say it's mental illness. And I'm sorry, what the Tippy Tappy has done has opened a whole can of worms of bonkers people who are this whack pack of insanity that have somehow legitimized their own mental illness through saying, I had to say something, or I couldn't switch off because you can. Stop being a big baby and switch off the things you don't like.
What would you say to these people that have relentlessly called you a narcissist online?
Yeah, it's interesting that, because
that word keeps popping up when I'm researching you.
Listen, there's two me's in a way. I am a performer on stage and on air, and I'm the real me, right? Which is, I would hope, more humble, certainly more shy. And in my real life, I don't fall out with anyone, ever. I'm doing a show. If you were to psychoanalyze Roy Chubby Brown, Jim Davidson, Katie, Russell Brand, any of these people through their act, of course you would come to conclusions that are wrong. All I'll tell you is this. I had the two most senior forensic psychologists forced upon me in prison because they couldn't keep me in a CCAT high security prison, which is HMP Stocken, which is the second book that I released, Surviving the Slammer.
Because you wrote several books in jail.
Yeah, so we started with the autobiography. That's that one. My Own Worst Enemy, which is the whole life story. Next came Stocken, which is at the highest security CCAT prison. They wanted to BCAT me like Tommy. They couldn't because it's a non-violent, non-sexual, non-drugs related
And where
crime.
can people buy all these books?
Amazon.
Amazon.
And then I went to a private prison after psychology. So this starts the day that I was ejaculated after pleasuring His Majesty at HMP Stocken. And by the way, they don't like that either, that I make jokes, you see. This upsets them. So, you know, a complete waste of doing time, I thought, was a really funny headline. Or 5.5 years pleasuring His Majesty, I think is humorous. But you see, they want reverence. The system wants reverence. They want me to care, be upset, be mad, be angry. So they got these two senior psychologists, which is in the book, to come and psychoanalyze me. Because if they can paint you as mad, they've won. Because forever, you will always be the guy that they... You're not moving them out the way, are you? I need my punters to see them.
I don't want them where there'll be more seen there.
Okay, good.
I've got your back.
Thank you. Well, I'd rather you had the front. I don't know what that means. Anyway, as I was saying... By the way, Tarquin isn't here today.
You're flirting with me, Alex.
No, I'm not, and I'll tell you why. I would have to be the train, not the tunnel. I don't do pain. I had a terrible incident in 1997 with some sweet corn and a big bone Barbara from Bradford. Never again. Anyway, you can find out on CFAX, page 888, what all of that means. Just stop distracting me.
Sorry, my love, go on.
So these psychologists came in and couldn't find a fucking thing. They couldn't find a thing.
What do you think they were digging for?
Well, for a start, so...
Were they looking at the psychopathy?
Listen, so
spectrum?
Stalkers have very clear patterns of behaviour, right? Obsessive, fixated, all of these words that... So the point you say to a psychologist, why did you stalk that or this or that or the other? And you say... because an email was published to close me down and I wanted to find out who it was, they're fucked. Because there's a logical explanation, and I'm having to be very careful what I say and don't say, there's a logical explanation for why I did what I did. When somebody wants to close you down, I believe you have the right to know who that is. And when it's done anonymously, it's not unreasonable. And bearing in mind, two of my convictions are stalking without fear, alarm, and distress. So if I'm not making you fearful or alarmed right now, I'm probably stalking you. There was no fear of violence.
The judge said that you weren't... That's the judge's words. He said that you weren't a threat, but your fans could be.
And that's what I said earlier. I'm the only person in show business or in the world who has been sent to prison for 5.5 years for somebody who didn't exist when nothing happened. How could you be sentenced? And they made a big thing about this. The fear of something that didn't happen that could. I mean, how do I know you're not going to murder me if I do a shit interview? Do I send you to prison for something you haven't done that you might do, that you could do? We're all capable of anything. These two psychologists couldn't find a thing. So when they say he's a narcissist, well, what is a narcissist? No compassion, blah, 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 blah. Well, let's rewind to my life. You're believing when I attack people on air and give 1-star reviews. You do know there were hundreds of people rang the police saying he gave me a 1-star review. And by the way, when I started, I was the #1 reviewer on YouTube for the West End and Broadway and blah, blah, blah. You get a lot more hits with a 1-star review than a 5-star review. So there's an element of show business in this as well, that it's fun to take the piss because actually that gets bigger ratings.
Are you now saying you were doing God's work, Alex?
I am, absolutely. And you know, for every single week that I was in prison, I went on a Saturday and fingered my organ for God, and on a Sunday and did the same in the chapel, and then I end up at Five Wells where an office has just gone to fucking prison for fucking all. I mean, we haven't got, we'll have to come back and do another one because I want to tell you about prison. We didn't even do that.
Oh, we're going to do it.
Oh, I'm bored. Aren't you sick of this already? I'm getting on my own nerves.
I'm just getting into it.
So you go to prison and you find yourself in a private prison that's like a fucking holiday camp, which is why it's called HM Pontins. And I've got a line of fucking pedos in front of me. It's the first mixed prison in Britain that Boris Johnson opened, where I'm now opposite a guy called Mike Souter. I had to work with him on the magazine and podcast. I kid you not. And I'm sat mixed with By the way, they're getting rid of them all now. So here's an exclusive for you. What they're doing with Fossway and Five Wells, the 2 prisons I went to, best prisons in the country, by the way, they're now moving out all of the bad lads, putting in the nonces. By the way, that's not an offensive term, not on normal courtyard exercise, i.e. sex offenders can't be because they have the shit kicked out of them, as I saw on a daily basis that you'll read about in these books. They're now mixing them. No, not anymore. They're taking out all
Are you grifting again?
I have to. It's the only form of income I've got. They're now taking out all the professional criminals and putting in more nonsense into the best 2 prisons in Britain because too many of them had the shit kicked out of them. So you're paying your tax for a £280 million prison. I did yoga twice a week. Yoga twice a week. I went to the coffee shop for a fucking mocha. I was on the board of directors. I was sat there once a week with the director of this prison, where I would sit there cross-examining him. I mean, you couldn't make this up.
How did you get on with the screws?
Well, the ones that weren't fucking other prisoners, I got on with really well. There was 2 types of screws, right? So they were those who were up to shit. Now, they're the ones, when I walked down, because I walked around like Celia Imrie with a folder under my arm, walking around the place as if I owned it. It was amazing. Every door fucking open, because nobody looked like me. I mean, really, it was, and they all loved me because I'd helped them.
They probably thought you were the warden.
Yeah, they did. they all thought I was staff. But cons, and we'll get into this either later or in another time, you know, these are abused people mainly who have there's some real wrong-uns. I'm not talking about nonsense. Can we take the nonsense away? I'm talking about criminals. They're nearly all addicted to something or have been abused and therefore are angry at the world. They are mostly dyslexic, ADHD. I was the head of neurodiversity for HMP Fossway. I had access to every pad, 1,800 beds in that biggest prison in the UK. I could go anywhere, anytime as the head of neurodiversity and sat in the director's meeting once a week to tell him how to do his job properly. And all the bosses were there and it was amazing.
Did you get in any trouble at all?
No, until the last 2 months. And somebody picked up on the books and they suddenly realised a mistake that many have made with my incarceration, that there was an end date. We go back full circle to where you started. I wasn't meant to survive the slammer. I was meant to be dead. And then it dawned on them, he's not dead, and he therefore gets back his human rights and free speech.
When you say you were meant to be dead, in a sense of they made sure you went to jail for a hefty amount of time in the hope you would lose your mind and maybe take your own life.
Well, the sentence was designed, I believe. For a start, it was consecutive. That should only be used in conspiracy. So we will get to what I'm doing now, which is aiming towards a retrial and exposing the corrupt cop and all of this shit, which is undeniable because she's being criminally investigated, etc., etc. But they made it so that I wouldn't get tag, which is a year now, right? If it had been under 4 years, I'd have got a year's tag, which is serving half, which is only a year behind the door. It had to be over 4 years, and that's why they made it consecutive. They added them all together, which is unheard of unless there's conspiracy in law. Now, listen, I don't know what's going on. One thing did happen that was interesting. The judge's wife got a job at the BBC a few days after I was sentenced, and she was paid £670,000 for the Tim Westwood trial. Anyway, so I got consecutive sentences. That's true, by the way.
That's a true story.
I'm not saying there's any connection. I'm just saying that's a fact. That my judge's wife was given a job by the BBC shortly afterwards. That's public domain, and she was paid £670,000. That was released last week.
Are you seething? Because how long did you actually serve?
2.9.
2.9 years.
Yeah. So I did a long time, and nobody could believe it.
Did you have time till you lost your mind in there?
I didn't, and I'll tell you why. I was so
quick.
lucky. So lucky. I think my Pitter State background helped. People think I'm some mincy boy from the West End. I'm not. I'm from Gedling, Pitter State, which was tough. And trust me, when you're ginger, micro penis, fat, ugly, in school, you got to have your wits about you. It couldn't be worse if I was German with calipers. I mean, really, I'm telling you, it's a tough life. So I'm a fighter. Now, I'm not a fighter in a way you've had to be a fighter. I have utmost respect, and I would never compare my face with what you've been through or many others.
Well, vice versa, mate. Yours is pretty fucking serious.
Right, but mine is sort of like a middle class thing now, but it wasn't then. When I was a kid, I lived on a pit estate and lived a working class. My dad, and we haven't even talked about the family. I mean, my God, what these people have been through. You know, and the knock on from prison, I was living like a king. Don't feel sorry for me in prison. The torture is what you're leaving behind. The Christmases, the 5 funerals I couldn't attend. That's the torture. The torture isn't being in a prison like this with underfloor heating and a shower and really being the elite of the prison, a super enhanced prisoner as I was right until the very end. Every officer respected me, opened a door for me, was very kind to me. You said, did I have problems with any officers? Only the corrupt ones, which end up being taken off in cuffs by the police. 4 at HMP Fossway in 1 week.
I bet all the lads in there liked you, didn't they?
Well, they did, because I'm also fighting for them. They could see when I went into the managers' meeting every week, I was on their side. Then most of them can't read and write. I mean, there are so many things wrong with rehabilitation in prison, and it starts with the fact that most of the men are disadvantaged. They're either abused, they're either undereducated, they're either from underprivileged backgrounds. They don't have the smarts to fight for themselves. And I'm telling you, the fucking probation service in prison are evil. I'm on my 26th probation officer, because every time these scum-sucking pond life lie, and I prove it, they bring me a new one. And then they say, we're going to have a fresh start. I'm done with fresh starts, Liam. I can't take any more fresh starts from a probation officer who for 4 months takes away my human rights by telling me I'm on curfew when I'm not. And they say, it's a mistake. You wouldn't believe how many mistakes litter these books, the 6 books that I wrote. I've actually got a 6-pack. Not in the same way as most of the gym lads, but my 6-pack of books is that's my legacy from prison. And I made that my job, and I saw it as a job. And they will regret putting me in prison, because if they think I've revealed things so far, they've heard nothing yet. Prisons are more corrupt than any government body I've ever encountered. And trust me, I've worked with Nottingham Police. By the way, did you notice Craig Guilford resigned just the other week? The chief constable who was head of Nottingham Police, whilst I was arrested 5 times and raided 3 times without a warrant, that was the same time that Callacane was under warrant for arrest and went on to murder 3 people, Liam.
Who's Janet Percival?
Janet Percival is my arresting, investigating officer. Janet Percival is currently under criminal investigation by Nottingham Police, as is her husband, who has threatened repeatedly, unashamedly, to kill me. He says that 1 call from me and you'll be drinking out of a straw. And he says, I forgot a corpse can't drink out of a straw. Janet Percival is the lady who got a High Court writ to gag me because I called her corrupt. And I was in prison at the time. I had said things like she changed a witness statement, where she had changed an incident that happened in a theatre, and she said he went backstage to ask for help, and I'd written, or the person had written, he went backstage to say hello. She said hello and help had been mistakenly confused because of her dyslexia, and she said that she felt that was defamatory. Unfortunately for her, she has done nothing since I've got out, despite the Rehabilitation Act saying that I'm entitled to continue my life. She's done nothing since than do interviews where she unfortunately has exposed herself and the force as being more corrupt than I could have ever believed. She's upset with them because they gave her Policewoman of the Year for sending me to prison, and very shortly afterwards early retired her, having done a deal over bullying with the chief constable. That's what she alleges. I'm not alleging it. That's what she alleges.
So there's a few people that were part of the whole trial and thing, because I know we have to be careful what we say, that it's materialised that there's some obvious skeletons in their closets.
Well,
is there more to come out? And as more as what else has been suppressed that you've not been able to say, but you legally can say now?
Well,
I know we've got to tread carefully, and and as much as we can talk about the trial as well, would be quite interesting.
Can we do it this way? Let's talk generically about lawfare.
Yes, I want to know how they've used lawfare against you.
So lawfare, for those who don't know, is when they can't find any other way to destroy you, beat you, silence you, force you into submission, imprison you, not kill yourself, they bankrupt you. And this isn't just me, this happens all over the world with people who they want to silence. And the best way to do it is the High Court. So when you get into a writ, let's talk about the Janet Percival one, for example. And this is controversial because I ended up half agreeing to something with a second half to get back into court, which I can't wait for, bearing in mind her own police force are currently criminally investigating her into effectively harassment. The parallels between what they say I am and what they do to me is astounding. And she's crossed a line by doing interviews where, for example, she admitted there were many mistakes in Alex Belfield's case, quote unquote. There were many mistakes. Hang on. I went to prison for 2.9 years on a 5.5-year sentence, and my investigating arresting officer, who overcame judges with bail, is now saying there were many mistakes.
Can you say what the mistakes were?
You tell me, Liam. So what we did was we went to Nottingham Police and we said...
I'm asking you in the hope you tell me.
Well, I'll come back and tell you.
Oh, I see.
I can't tell you for various reasons.
Okay.
Listen, this is... I've got to be very careful. I'm treading a tightrope here.
I know we are.
So...
And I don't want to get you back.
So here's what I want to do is I like pieces of paper, right? On the train when I came here today, I sent you a text from the investigating officer of my arresting officer, who's now emigrated to Costa Rica. Now, I've never heard of anybody retiring to Costa Rica, but it's very difficult to get any kind of justice with somebody who is threatening to kill you or defaming you or harassing you when they've moved to effectively a third world country. And that's the position Nottingham Police are in now. I believe both of them would have been arrested had they not been in Central America. And my guy who's investigating you, and I sent you the screen grab earlier, has been told by MOJ, my probation officer, not to put anything in writing. And they said during my last probation meeting, and by the way, I have to see these goons every week. For a guy who's a 0.17% risk, this is unheard of.
Why would they not want things in writing? Why would they not want a paper trail?
What was your question, Liam?
Why would they not want a paper trail?
What was your question, Liam?
How much would it take for you to fuck Bonnie Blue? Let's have a serious conversation.
How much would I pay her or she pay me?
Ooh.
I charge £1 an inch. I've got change. Why would they not want the word that the probation officer used last week? And by the way, they've both disappeared now. So 25 and 26 didn't turn up this week for the 2-minute probation meeting that I have to do every week because I'm so dangerous at 0.17%. And the word she used was paper trail. And I thought that was a really curious Really curious thing. The police must phone you, she said. We want the police to phone you. I said, what? So there's no paper trail. And I sent you the text on the train from the investigating officer of my arresting officer who's emigrated to Costa Rica, whose husband's given death threats, who she's being investigated. You couldn't write this.
I mean, that text doesn't look good for them at all.
I have been told not to email you or put anything in writing.
I've seen that as well.
Why would the Home Office and the MOJ decide that they don't want anything in writing? I'll tell you why. We are the closest I've ever been to cracking this. If I were to tell you I'm currently involved in a High Court writ over harassment, and we have proved in a witness statement that I've shown you so that you know I'm telling the truth, has proven that the person logged onto my website having paid with 3 different accounts 64 times and watched me for 17 hours. How could I harass someone that is harassing themselves? Liam, if this doesn't prove nothing's adding up, at the very least from this interview, even if you still think, can I say cunt?
Yes, please do.
If you still by the end of this believe I'm a cunt, and you'd have every right to do so, I've seen myself in a full-length mirror, surely even the stupidest imbecile would say this doesn't add up, at the very least. Surely even the stupidest imbecile would say this doesn't add up, at the very least. As we sit here today, I have been gagged in the High Court by an arresting officer who is now being criminally investigated, who has moved to Costa Rica. On that point alone, and the fact that I am still being lawfared into bankruptcy, because all they've got left is to take my house. Now, let me tell you, as a working class lad, I now live in the house of my dreams. It's a 4-bedroom house. You wouldn't even get a flat in London for the cost of my house. It's nothing by a London standard. But I love it because it's got my shit everywhere. I've got my baby grand piano, which is the best thing in the world. My piano is my savior. When anything goes wrong, that thing saves my life. Through the fingers that everything goes, it saved my life. It did in prison. When that chapel, and I've become hugely respectful of the system. What I don't like about it is the first time I went there, they said, you're forgiven. And I thought, well, EFOT to 3-year-old, how is he forgiven? And I can't live with that. Okay, so that's where I have a problem with the church. Forgiveness, I'm not noble enough. And the word noble is interesting because a lot of people have said to me, why couldn't you have just ignored them? Or listen, we're all flawed as human beings. And when you're under attack, and I'm now being attacked by, for example, we know who it is, a troll who every single day puts tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet, obsessing in the early hours of the morning, blah, 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 finding old clips and finding what I was doing on this, blah, 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 blah. The police know he is about to be arrested. When you've got them conspiring with people who have privileged information which is protected, and you know that your arresting officer has undeniably given information to YouTubers and corrupt Met officers who are disgraced, who then email you with blatant lies, we're actually in the strongest position I've ever been, because the paper trail they want to stop is what will, hopefully, please God, open this whole can of worms to the public, where we will finally get to the truth. Whether you think I'm despicable or not, whether you think my opinions are abhorrent, whether you think I'm deeply unattractive and hung like a twiglet, doesn't matter. Is this fair? And that's what the British people don't like. Injustice and unfairness is the one thing this country won't stand.
And you know, if people do what I've done in preparation for today, and you have made my job very easy, and I thank you for that. And
but I have to, because people will just deny it. If I don't give you evidence, they will just say he's lying.
I know that. But if people go and do a little bit of due diligence like I did, and do a bit of fishing around, they will see that you have got a plethora of trolls, and they've left their own paper trail. And you could quite easily say, well, it looks like you're being stalked now.
Well, and that's undeniable by the fact that the police have absolutely 100% decided criminally, I am the victim of at least 3 people. That's undeniable.
And you have,
as we sit
and
here.
you have had a stalker before, haven't you?
Yes.
Tell me the toenail story.
Well, so this is where it gets really complicated.
And fucking odd.
Scary, because a guy, and it's their public domain, sent toenail clippings from Alex Belfield, the voice of reason, and put posters on pub walls saying, I believe this person is a paedophile, Alex Belfield, the voice of reason, and went to prison for 6 months. Nottingham police chose not to tell me. Now, only last week I got a letter, because everybody's invested. We've got GMP, Greater Manchester Police, Derbyshire Police, and Nottingham Police, and Wiltshire Police, all investigating themselves over the mishandling of me in various ways. Nottingham Police have got the biggest job trying to unpick Percival's investigation and her actions since. Another officer is dealing with the criminal aspect of her harassment lies and what she's doing. And of course, her husband, who we believe obviously are complicit, and he's threatened to kill me and unashamedly keeps repeating it. So that's where we're at with that. The other thing that Nottingham Police are now investigating is, why wasn't I told that a man had been arrested, was held on remand and went to prison for sending toenail clippings as me that could have had the shit kicked out of me at a moment's notice? Why wasn't I told? I wasn't told because they didn't want me to be the victim, ever. This was at exactly the same time as Callacane was on the street about to murder 3 people, and I was being investigated for malicious communication. Now, I wasn't arrested on stalking. It took them 2 years to trump up stalking, and nothing happened. I was arrested on malcoms. That's not anything that's going to land you in prison. Harassment is almost certainly not going to. They had to trump it up, but what they couldn't have was the narrative that I was the victim of a man who was trying to get me murdered by sending toenail clippings. And I'm not making this up. It's on court record. It's public domain. There's a Daily Mail article. There's a Mirror article. There's a Manchester Evening News article. And Derbyshire Police said to me just last week, it was the job of Nottingham Police to protect you. They had a duty of care to you. Anybody could have come round your house, set the house on fire. I had to replace my door. Well, they smashed in my door. I can't have a letterbox. I've got 8 CCTV cameras. We could make a Netflix special. I have to be so keen on my security because even now there are dark forces, evil, wicked people who are still trying to stitch me up. But you said it earlier about the trolls. And by the way, I put my arresting officer and her husband in that category. They're so thick. They've gone public with their own face, words and name. And by the way, we don't even know what my arresting officer's name is. They're investigating at Nottingham Police whether she is the name that she says she is, because Companies House doesn't believe it is. How do you swear on a Bible in court? They're investigating it. Who knows? Liam, nothing makes sense. No. But at the point they were willing to put me at grave risk, I believe that, grave risk, by this nutcase, who, by the way, another one I've never heard of and never met. Never heard of and never met. That's the problem with this. People become infatuated with you and you're not even aware of it. We go into people's homes, and I have the greatest job on earth, especially with the phone in, which is my favourite thing. I turn my computer on at 9 o'clock on a Sunday and Wednesday when I'm allowed and not being violated by these pigs in probation who just keep lying and cheating to take away my human rights and free speech. I turn that on and I'm in people's houses, bedrooms, kitchens. It's a great thing. But when you're in the mind of a nutcase and the whack pack of absolutely distorted people who are so broken as individuals, they'll fixate on you to a point where they're willing to lie and cheat and stitch you up with toenail clippings. Tell me this is normal and fair.
Oh, it's fucking mad. I mean, did he get... Was
6 months.
6 months. The DNA, was that pulled from the toenails? What a fucking lunatic.
It was nothing to do with me. But here's the major point, from a forensics point of view. Somebody somewhere, under Craig Guilford's watch, decided it was absolutely 100% nothing to do with me. And I'm going to use your platform to say sorry to a lady who I've given not complimentary reviews to. Carrie Hope Fletcher is the sister of a guy from McFly, Tom Fletcher. And they were two people who had this imbecile sending his toenail clippings from me.
Right.
I didn't know, Carrie. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you received that, believing it could have been me. You might not be my cup of tea in Ugly Cinderella in the West End or whatever, but nobody deserves that. And the fact that Nottingham police, and she said in court, they knew it wasn't me. They knew, the police knew I was not capable of that. It was nothing. It was a stitch up. But they protected a scumbag stalker who went to prison in 2021 to stitch me up. A plague on your private parts. I hope the person who did that rots in hell, because it's the darkest, sickest thing you can do to an individual. It's evil. Liam, it's evil. The structure that is behind this, the Twin Tower that is about to collapse is so epic, I can't even comprehend it.
I know we've had to be, for people watching, we've had to be very careful today because it's complicated and Alex doesn't want to return back to jail and I don't want to dig for things that are going to send him back there. So, I mean, this is as much as you could have ever possibly wished for if you follow this whole thing. So, to keep it safe again, so that we can protect your liberty, what can you say? What can the public expect? What's your next move going to be?
It's the 22nd of January 2026 today. There is something going into a court tomorrow that I believe will exonerate me and at least vindicate me and at least prove that this is not what it was set out to be by the media who were complicit. By the way, I sat in court for 5 weeks where the media stood up and walked out when we spoke, the defence. They only covered the prosecution. And during sentencing, they refused to acknowledge that I was a carer for my auntie who had MS, and that by sending me to prison, my 8 staff would be left out of work. Many have kids. One of my producers had a guy who was criminally investigated, took his child's image because of me, and I take it on the chin, it's all my fault, because of the voice of reason. If they can't get you, they go for the people around you. And people say, why are you so private? Why am I private? They fucking come for everyone. They will use their tentacles to get anyone. That's how evil these radical lefties are, and they're a breed. They all look the same. They all look special. Liam, you know what I'm talking about. There's a certain look in the eyes, there's a certain haircut, there's a certain breed, there's a certain height, there's a certain thing about these trolls.
It's the glaze.
There's something, and you can see it. It's written on their soul. And this pig took my producer's son and did the most awful pedophilic thing to it. I can't even describe it on here. It's so awful. And I take responsibility for that. Nothing happened to that guy. We live in a country that is two-tiered beyond any explanation in a podcast.
And I think it's now beyond any reasonable doubt.
And that's the point, is I was convicted beyond reasonable doubt.
Did you plead guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty. And I maintain my innocence. And that's a problem for the state. Lucy Connolly, for her own reasons that she'll explain.
That's what I was wondering, if they forced your hand to plead guilty.
No.
I didn't know. Okay.
No, I maintain my innocence from day one as a journalist, which they conflated, and in the belief that there is no way on God's earth I could be convicted as a stalker. Harassment is different because you only have to contact someone more than twice. If they don't want you to, you are harassing them by law. So we know they pick and choose, but that's the law. And the lesson I've learnt is no more emails, no more defending myself. I can't. I now have to pay expensive lawyers tens of thousands of pounds.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds.
I'm still, last week, £9,000, 15 grand this week for the High Court. It's relentless, but that's the game. That's the game now. All they've got left. I ain't going to kill myself. If I die, and I tell you this man to man, if you suddenly hear I'm dead, it ain't because of me. If I suddenly end up in a tunnel being driven in a taxi and I disappear in a terrible car crash, it ain't me. I've never felt stronger. And you know what fucks me off more than anything, Liam? I'm very lucky. I've got so many beautiful friends and family. There hasn't been a day since I got out, I've put on a stone, that I haven't had a dinner party at my house or been in a restaurant. There aren't enough days in the week. And I'm so blessed to have a house, to have love and support and kindness. And the fans, I haven't even got to the fans, tens of thousands of emails and letters, which I showed on my channel. Every day they fucking hate me because somebody, these guards have to read them. Oh, we're going to catch him out. We're going to catch him out. No, you didn't. You never caught me out. They read these 5 times each. And now probation claim we need a copy because we haven't read them. You haven't read them. Your security have read them 5 times. There's not a word in there you've pulled. They're still trying to paint the picture. Why? Because that's their narrative.
And are you confident you'll get a retrial?
I don't know, because come and ask me in a week for various reasons.
That's the goal anyway.
Let me tell you why. I don't trust the system.
No.
I don't trust when you could go through what I have with so much corruption and so many, many things being exposed. From Craig Guilford, who is now gone, retired before he was sacked. How is that a thing with public money? What is it about these civil serpents? They're all the same. Public money, the contempt makes me want to vomit in my own eyeballs. It's disgusting. This is public money. Do you know how much my trial cost? Millions. Millions of pounds.
Yeah, they must really want you quiet.
To incarcerate me is $48,000 a year. I'm now having weekly probation, not just one probation officer, as somebody, if I was up for attempted murder, I'd have one probation officer, and by now I'd be down to once every 4 or 6 weeks. I have 2 every single week. We have nothing to talk about. And all they want to do is keep digging and digging and digging and trying and trying. And like the police who found fuck all, they cannot get a grip on how they can shaft me now. And that's why this interview could land me back in prison. And if it does, I beg of people to subscribe to my YouTube channel, because the one thing they couldn't do was stop me filming with a camera in my home. I now have tens, if not hundreds, of videos ready to go telling the whole story. It will all be there.
We'll put your links in the description, but just say it out loud where my audience can find you on all your platforms.
I think if you put in Alex Belfield, the voice of reason, it'll probably come up top.
YouTube is your main platform.
Yeah. And, you know, and feel free to watch these trolls who have been fed information by corrupt police officers who will be outed. You know, the threats of violence. You know, have you noticed this new thing of, oh, why don't we have a fight? Why don't we have a fight? Sorry? Have a fight. I don't fight people. Look at me. I'm not a fighter. Isn't it funny that they're more scared of words than physical violence? Look what people get away with. Look what that Labour MP did down south when he called people to arms. Yet, of course, we don't worry about that. Look what happened. The consequences of Southport, and actually the deflection and distraction from what it was really about. And we haven't time to talk politics. I could sit here all day because you're as passionate as I am. But what I'm seeing in this country is the most despicable thing, where they're trying to convince us and brainwash us. You know, the one line, my mate Andrew Bridgen, who's the most terrific MP I've ever met, he cares. He cares, and he's lost everything for caring. And they're lawfaring him. Trust me. Good luck to Matt Hancock. They're lawfaring the shit out of him, and I just pray he gets some justice, because he did not deserve to be exorcised from the Houses of Parliament like he was.
He's the MP that was calling out COVID.
Yes, and on the same ship as me, which was, why are we wearing masks that don't work because they've got fucking holes in them? Why is Dr. Hillary, who apparently had a heart attack yesterday, and I sent my condolences to his family. I didn't know he had a heart. And this man told us to wear a mask. This man told us to... This man told us to wear a mask while swimming in the sea. I'll take that. We're not going to be there. Why don't we stop now? That was a genuine laugh. I've not had one of those in 30 years. And this man, there he is, telling us to wear masks in the swimming pool to not get COVID, and then jab children and all. And that's what Andrew was doing, was using the facts. And I managed to get away with it. Many of my colleagues didn't. Anna Breeze, you know, obliterated from social media, and you too. This is a game where if your face doesn't fit and your words don't match with the agenda, they will wipe you out. And if you don't take anything away from this other than this final point, if you want to do what I do, have the balls to stand up and take the punch, because there's going to be a couple of trials this year that I think are going to leave people very vulnerable, because prison isn't easy. The mental torture of it. And let me tell you, the phone saved my life. Pre-COVID, there were no phones in pads. There are phones in every pad now. Thank God. I'd have been dead without them. And the torture of being isolated is what makes you want to kill yourself. Like so many, including Peter Lynch. We must never forget Peter Lynch.
Yeah, rest in peace, man.
His family, imagine the torture. And they wanted that for me. Right now, you know there are people who will have a party if it's announced that I'm dead.
Yeah, it's a sick world we live in. But the establishment done a very good job of painting you out to be the devil. And then when you mix that in with a 5.5-year sentence that's been broadcast as fact and that you're guilty, even though you're not guilty, in your words you're not guilty, they have done a good job demonising you. But I smelt a bit of a rat. Hence why we're here.
I truly appreciate it. And you know, I think like with the post office, when there is such a clusterfuck of noise from so many agencies, lest we forget, this started with the BBC. It moved to the police. It ends up at the MOJ that goes to the Home Office. Andrew Bridgen asked Priti Patel, or Prickstick Patel as I call her, what's going on with Alex Belfield as a journalist? Why has he been arrested 5 times and raided 3 times? And she said 4 words, keep out of it. She didn't say, who is he? Keep out of it. Out of it.
Well, on that note, I'm now going to keep out of it and ask people to go and follow Alex on his platforms. We're going to put his YouTube and his X in there and his direct website as well. Amazon, you can get his books. He's just clearing the table where Money Blue's been sat. That is as deep a dive as we could take in such
This is the only way of earning any money. We don't know when I'm going to be back on air.
Can I hold this one up or not?
Well, that's the one that can't be released. You can show them this. So this
Are you sure? I don't want the final moment me getting you nicked.
I don't care. This is the book that can't be released till the end of my license. Probation have made my life a hell.
Imagine that, going to jail writing like multiple books. How many did you write?
6.
6 books in 2.9 years. So there you go.
5 copies of each. It's a job, and I made it a job. I just want to thank you for the opportunity. Listen, I don't talk to anyone. I don't trust anyone, and I think I'm very wise to be cautious. I've researched your story, and I think you're an incredible human being. Shit at doing interviews, but I think you're a remarkable man.
I'm with you. You fucking talk too much.
I know. I'm sorry about that. The ideal guest, just say nothing. Say nothing.
The thing is, the safest thing was for me to just sit back and listen. But I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to you talk as well.
I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. For 4 months, they lied and gagged me. They continue to lie. We have gone to the MOJ about the tour and the website and the this and the that. This can't be right, and it can't be legal. Gagging a man who is rehabilitated with a less than 1% risk, that's not allowed the human right of free speech, shows where this fucking country's at. And I don't expect anybody to write to their MP. Please write to your MP. I don't expect anybody to sing and dance online. Please make videos. But at least accept, I've served my time. They can't say I've done anything wrong because I'm sat here. I'm on license. I'm the highest level security risk in this country, equivalent to Shamima, little Miss Begum, who we're going to bring back because we don't worry about her. She's of no concern. We don't worry, do we, about people like her because she's got human rights. I have no fucking human rights, even though my own arresting officer and her husband who threatened to kill me is under criminal investigation. I don't know what to tell you. And if this sends me back to prison, you know what, so be it. I have to keep taking it on the chin. I've took it on the chin since 2019 when I outed that pedo in Yorkshire. And you know what, Liam, I'm so grateful that you've allowed me the time, despite this villages, and I'm going to have a squirt and a wipe eventually. And thank you. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Final question, and I'll hold that just in case you say Justin Bieber. But if the establishment end up getting you killed,
yes,
what song would you want played at your funeral?
Well, you want the funny one? Let's do the funny one. Is
Justin Bieber?
Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead would be the funny one. The truth is, I love a song called Concerto de Angeles, which is a beautiful song. And if not that, something from Delibes Lakme, like the Flower Duet. I love proper music, and no, it would not be little Justin Bieber, who seems obsessed with getting his penis out, which I would on the internet, but unfortunately would just remind the young ladies to get a button mushroom for the omelette, so I won't be doing that.
It will get them close to the screen, though. Alex,
thank you, my mate.
Stay alive.
Thank you, my mate.
God bless you, brother.